This is the Realty Classroom Podcast, episode number 140. What problem are you solving and why that one? Are you a real estate agent with an entrepreneurial spirit who wants to turn your job into a business without sacrificing your lifestyle, but you just can't seem to find the right plan or heck, any plan to help you get there? Well, then you are definitely in the right place. I'm Danny Griffin, the founder of the Realty Classroom and the host of this podcast. Now, to help you take immediate action to get started in the right direction, I've created a free strategic plan for you that's waiting at freeagentgift.com. That's freeagentgift.com. Now, let's get started. In this episode, I want to talk to you about something that is a really important question that I ask my mastermind members every single week. What problem are you solving and why that one? And here's why. The first point today is that you want to start with how the business works and what you personally face to build your own version of it. This is a concept that I think is lost on most people when they get involved in this business. And I know that because I can always speak about my Griffin Realty Group, my real brokerage outside of the coaching program that serves as the model for everything that we teach and talk about at the Realty Classroom. And as new agents are coming to us, you can just see their misinterpretation or their misperception about how the agent business really works. And there are a lot of delusions. And it's really important to pattern interrupt those people and say, look, whether or not you want to join us, you need to get real about how this business really works. So for the agent coming in, I'll give you an example. We were talking to a nice young gal, super enthusiastic, young mom, 2 kids, works in the insurance business, wants to go and get into real estate. And when I asked, why did you apply to us? Because we are now largely a virtual agency, first all over the state of Massachusetts. Then we're going further as we get our reciprocal licenses in place. And then there's no limit. We just want to help as many people get started as they can. And when they come to us, it's like, well, I saw that you had an office yourself in Boston and Cape Cod, and I really want to work in those places. Great. Where are you? Nowhere near either one, right? So you stop somebody and say, look, I get it. But the most important thing that you have to understand is, how does the business really work? And we're going to get into this in a second. But of course, listings are going to come up, and the geography where those listings are is going to come up. So you start off with how the business works, and then what you face. Where are you at? So whomever you might be listening to this podcast, you might be brand new thinking about getting into it. You might be a top producer who's already into it. It doesn't matter to me where you're at. It's going to be the same answer. Now, your challenges are different, but the core of how the business works for each of you is not. The fundamentals for a top producer are the exact same fundamentals for a brand new agent, period. I mean, it's just the truth about the way any business works. If you're an independent contractor getting to insurance, getting into mortgages, getting into real estate, there's a certain way that the business works at its best. And the good news is a lot of that's actually relatively simple, but you have to become a student of that first. Seek somebody out like me in whatever business you are, but especially real estate, to help you ask that question and get the answer, right? And so we're going to get into this in a second here. Let me go to the second piece of that once you get beyond it. Once you begin to understand how the business works, the second point is, don't cherry pick your biggest task based on your personal discretion. Let me explain. When you come on this podcast, every single time at the intro and the outro, I say freeagentgift.com, freeagentgift.com, because there is the gift where I give you a chunked up version of how this really works. How the business really works. And it's scalable. So again, those are the fundamentals in that gift I give, which is a wireframe for understanding and a consciousness about the things that you have to deal with. And the number one thing you have to deal with is the fact that this is a business. It's not a job. And if it's a business, how does it work? Well, very simply put, we get listings. We put them into the multiple listing service. We share that with each other so that there's inventory, quote unquote, that we can all sell. That's it. I mean, that's a fundamental building block of the entire business. So that begs the question, well, who gets the listings? There you go. There's the problem, whether you're new or a veteran, that you should be solving. And if anybody gives you a different advice, you have a serious problem right off the bat. I will challenge anybody, because here's what happens. When you cherry pick and you're a manager, you might be managing new agents or veteran agents, tell them, oh, just get the buyers, they're easier to get. That's a perception that is a killer. So what you're actually saying to somebody, even if they're brand new, is, well, you can pick up some buyers because they're easier. Just sit in an open house and you'll get them. Don't worry about the listings. What? That's insane. That's absolutely insane when you really think about it. If you're going to be successful in the real estate agent business, you need to learn how to get listings. Because let's just think about this. If you don't, you become beholden to everybody else's work. Everybody else who goes out and gets the listings and then shares them into MLS. You have to wait for them to do that and then match a buyer up. There's nothing wrong with the buy side. It takes a buyer to buy a listing so that a wholesale, two sides of it, are consummated. I get that. But the way that the business works starts with listings. If there were no listings, what are you going to do? You're going to inventory a whole bunch of buyers and now there are no listings? Let that sink in. So it becomes a very logical moment that all of us as agents, and again, I understand, I'm getting all choked up and excited. I understand that there are agencies out there that represent only buyers. And I always say this when it comes up. I feel bad like I'm knocking them. But they have to sit around and wait for the rest of us to get the listings, to put them into MLS, to then subsequently sell them. The good news for them is that there are plenty of people out there hustling and getting listings. Great. But their business model is based on waiting for that to happen instead of going out and proactively making it happen. And if there were all just buyer agents out there, there'd be no listings. So that's not the way the business works in its entirety. That's not the core and fundamental way. Somebody has to go get these listings. So if you cherry pick how you're going to do this because your personal discretion, or worse, your fear, or even worse, the counsel you get from somebody who's advising you is to only do buyers, well, that's a problem. And that's a cherry picking that makes you feel comfortable based on any of those things that could be problematic to you. So be careful of saying, well, and when I say cherry pick, I have coached so many people, especially brand new, I just do buyers, they're easier. I have an agent that's been with me for a long time. He's had his license with me for a long time. And he loves buyers because it's a certainty to him. But then the other day when he was trying to refer me one of his own listings, we're not doing that. I'll go in the house with you. I'll show you the 7-step formula we use. It's simple. It's 5th grade easy, and you'll learn it. Well, needless to say, instead of giving me most of his money to do the job, he's now got it under agreement. He's done a great job. It's been a difficult sale. He's had to do it 3 times, but he benchmarked it against the 7 steps, and he's there. So instead of having this personal discretion over the years that he only does buyers and he likes buyers better, all that crazy talk in his head, we solved it, boom, in one easy 7-step program that we applied to one of these listings. And he has done a tremendous job in given the fact that it wasn't an easy deal. So no more personal discretion on his part. In fact, I can start to move him in the direction of blending his book of business to be cognizant and aware that he wants to acquire these listings now. So there's no more cherry picking based on his fear that he knew one thing or was comfortable with one thing, didn't want to make a mistake, whatever. All these stories that we tell ourselves. So you stop solving the problem of always trying to get buyers and you open up the other half of the business, which is to get the listings. And if anything, now you cheat your efforts to solve that problem on that side. Okay. Let me get to the next point here. I'm moving through this one pretty quickly here because I think it concise and precise on this topic should be the call of the day. The third point is you are smart enough to solve, this is from my top producers, by the way, you are smart enough to solve complex issues, but the easiest are the most profitable. So let me give you an anecdote there. So Tony, and I've mentioned Tony, one of my clients in the past, Tony, super bright young guy. And this is a really, really encouraging story of hope that if you have a full-time job and you want to make this part of your life, you can. Tony's a full-time fire captain and he has 2 little kids and a beautiful wife. And Tony spends a lot of time building this business. And Tony was doing a great job of acquiring listings, which he has to have because he has limited time that he could run around with buyers anyway because there's a full-time job as a fire captain. So he built a business based largely off of listings. He did it the easiest way possible, which was to have an outbound call system going, and it worked. 1/3 of his business came from outbound calls, in his case, to expireds, and it worked. But then the minute he let his telemarketer go, he never replaced her where he could get that leverage of time. Instead, he decided, well, I'm going to solve a more complex problem. Instead of sticking with what works, I'm going to go online and I'm going to figure out a way to use Facebook to get people to react to me, to book their own appointment with me automatically for me to come over. Sounds pretty complex. And you know what? He solved it. A couple of people have indeed gone through that process and booked themselves, but at nowhere near the breakneck speed that he was getting into houses when there was a simpler formula to get in conversations with sellers that he really wanted to list. So why was he solving a much more complex problem before he was mastering something that was so straightforward about the very thing that we need to do, which is acquire listings? It's a head scratcher, isn't it? And so let's go to somebody newer. And I'll go back to the gal Stephanie that we were talking to the other day. Her perception of geography and wanting to go, she lives in a spot in Massachusetts that is literally about 45 minutes to an hour away from downtown Boston, 2 hours away from Cape Cod, but loves and is enamored by those brands, as most people are. They flock to those places. For me personally, those are real locations within which we do business because I live in both those places. I spend time in both those places. So I'm more apt to fish off the dock for my own book of business with my own internal listings team at Griffin Realty Group. So when I said to her, look, you could do that, but let me caution you this. What happens when you have the problem or the challenge of trying to explain to a seller you live an hour to 2 hours away and that they're going to want you to have some sense of being on demand? Who's going to show my property? Who's going to come by and sell it for me? You're going to get those challenges. So now all of a sudden you've made your situation to acquire listings more complex, when my advice was, why wouldn't you just stay in Springfield, Massachusetts and look for at or above the median properties? There's some gorgeous properties out there in the western part of the state, and they're expensive, and they're right down the street, and you live there, and there's familiarity with geography, and that's where the inventory is. And you have 2 little kids. Why are you making this complex? Now, you could solve it. I would never want to stop Stephanie or somebody from thinking big like that. But the best advice is not that. So you're causing even problems of complexity. And again, in her case, she doesn't know what she doesn't know about how this business works. So now all of a sudden there's a big eye-opener as to how it does work. And now you become realistic because she has big, lofty financial goals. Well, the next thing to say is, okay, look, that's a big, lofty goal, definitely doable, and then some. I know because I teach brand new agents all the way to top producers, and I've seen the evolution of all. But let's start with the reality. The reality is in the United States, the average agent is selling about 3 properties plus or minus a year. We've got a weird statistic now we've made up called the typical agent sells 7. I don't even know what the typical agent is. What do we just ignore all of the statistics of the people that sell 0 to a couple that bring the average down to about 3? No, we don't. We get real and we say, look, 3 deals a year for a lot of agents, if they could stick to the median and above price, would be a fabulous part-time job that could be professionalized so that the consumer has professional treatment. I'm all for it. That's a much easier problem to solve, to be professional with your first 3 instead of skipping up the ladder to try to figure out how you're going to do enough to do $100,000 in revenue. Let's just start with the first deal and give you professional context. Let's solve that. How do you walk into a house as a brand new agent with a brand new license, even though you're professional? A lot of the folks that we hire at my brokerage are really, really professional people. They're coming from other businesses, corporations. They've been professionalized by their experience. I simply need to give them the professional training so that the minute they walk in the door the first day, they're formulaic in their approach. They show the seller how very simply through a very clear formula, the context is professionalized and we give them the best chance to win regardless of experience. So a new agent at the Griffin Realty Group can compete day one because they're professional and so is the system. See, that's a simpler way. And I said this here in this point. You're smart enough to solve complex problems as a new agent, as a veteran, but the easiest solutions, if you could learn those and handle those challenges first, they're by far more profitable. I was just talking to Autumn before the call. Autumn is my telemarketer extraordinaire. And that's what we were talking about. As a telemarketer, she knows that if you go to Facebook, you know what her comment was about Facebook? She said, it's too slow. Facebook's too slow. And at first I didn't quite catch what she was saying, but then I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly what she's saying. She's saying that by the time I run an ad, run it to good copy, run it to a landing page, get that person, try to qualify them, follow up with them until they're really ready, and maybe they are, maybe they're not. All that time that it takes to get one, we could have had 15 conversations with people that we know exactly are out there where somebody has passed probates, where somebody's expired, where somebody's trying to sell it themselves. Right? Or somebody's been referred to us and it's a follow-up call. All of those are much quicker and simpler problems and challenges. You have to solve the challenge of where do I get the expireds from? Where do I get the probates from? Where do I get the FSBOs from? How do I get referrals? Sure, you have to solve those problems as your challenges, but those are far easier to solve than the complexities and the guessing game that the internet has thrown into this. I mean, it's much more complex these days. And again, I'm not knocking the internet. I'm a huge believer that your website means everything for people to vet you. Very simple. There's another challenge. So many of my coaching members that are getting weaned off of this ridiculousness of buying leads by the gazillion and more so saying, am I featuring my properties of my sellers online so other sellers and other buyers can see it? Do I have offers there? Do I have a blog and a vlog about how the market's doing? Seller tips, buyer tips, agents tips, very basic stuff. Solve these problems. They're simple and they're easier and they're much more profitable. People go to your website to vet you all the time. Sure, they might go to the social platform and sure, you might be posting things there. But if you just post it at one place, your website, and syndicate it out to all the channels, it's easier. See what I mean? So many of you spending enormous amounts of time on complex social media formulas and content calendars, where if you would just do one vlog post a month about how the market's doing in the area you're covering, and then a series of a tip a week for sellers and buyers, that's a darn good start. That's an easier problem to solve. But again, if you're making it more complex in your mind, and then you're wondering, here's the worst part. Then you're wondering why you're not getting any sales. Then you're saying silly things like the business is not for you. No, you're just solving problems that you shouldn't be, right? You're not in the social media training business. You're not trying to train the seller to go to social media to figure out real estate. You simply want to see if somebody wants to buy or sell so you can get out in the field with them. It's a very physical business, right? So the last point here is just stick to the major basics. And there will be plenty of micro challenges that need resolution that will keep you busy. What do I mean? If the major basic of acquiring listings starts off, for example, with you want to pursue expireds. Okay, I just keep using that because it's one of the most obvious things that a lot of the people that I grew up with in the business ducked it, made it a bad thing, turned it into a negative. When the truth is, here are these people that are desperate for help. Why don't we just slow down and solve the major problem of helping somebody with an expired listing that might appreciate that, let us in the house, and maybe even list with us. That's a pretty major basic problem to solve that falls under the very major basic category of how do I acquire listings. Now, when I get down into that, now you've got to go back to your telemarketing and you have to go to the other micro challenges of what do I send them? Okay, so now you start to work on what kind of a cloud CMA or a pictures and details of what's sold around them, plus a cover letter is a micro challenge you have to, that speaks properly to them. You have to come up with a seller plan. You get that on the mail. You follow up with scripts. See where I'm going? So under the acquisition of sellers, I chose expireds, and then I had to solve all of these issues underneath. And if I just work on that, I get better and better and better and faster and faster and faster and more is happening quickly. So I stay, not only am I just choosing that, but I'm getting now micro down into a thing that matters way more to me than trying to be like a guru of Facebook paid ads, even Google paid ads. Again, I have spent money on both. But when I realized why was I solving those problems? Why am I sitting there trying to figure out the Google algorithm for SEO and all these buzzwords, when the truth is that's like the longest road to take to get into a conversation with a seller or a buyer? This makes no sense to me. You know what the fastest path for me getting into a conversation with a buyer is? Once I solve the seller issue and I have the listings, I go do an open house. I know you think I'm crazy. I do them myself still, because for an hour and a half sitting in a house, serving my seller and being able to talk directly to the buyer or the potential neighbor who wants to sell, my gosh, I can't tell you how many times I've converted business just like that. Well, you're all out there monkeying around with the internet. I don't get it. Stop doing that. Solve the basics first. Get offline and get in the street first and move backwards into digital that way. Again, I'm not negative on the Facebooks of the world. You'll see me all over Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, but you have to understand I'm doing it differently than you are. I'm starting with core strategies, putting them on my website, my actual business site, and syndicating out there. So it's a lot easier than you think it is. I'm into media production. I love digital, because I know sellers and buyers and agents want to go vet us. They want to check us out. So I am definitely a media company. Here I am sitting here doing a podcast that turns into a vlog, that turns into even a little bit of a blog. I know how to leverage this time. But if you ask me, take away everything, what would I be doing? I wouldn't be solving a media problem. I'd be solving a telemarketing problem to get me into more houses to list them. Okay? Let me go back and summarize these points. What problem are you solving? You have to ask yourself. And why that one? And the way that you benchmark this is you start with how the business really works and what you personally face to build your own. So if you're brand new, for example, you get taught by someone like me that this is the listings acquisition business. He or she who controls more listings gets more leverage of people going to work for them to sell their property for them. So what do you have to do to build your own listings acquisition effort? Next, don't cherry pick your biggest task based on your personal discretion. Oh, I think buyers are easier. Or my manager told me just go after buyers in the beginning. It's easier. No, that's personal discretion. That flies in the face of how the business works. I'm not saying you can't go out the first day or the many days after you've been in it and get buyers. I'm simply saying you have to face that challenge of listings acquisition. The listings will beget the buyers. Next point, you're smart enough, especially if you listen to this podcast, because you're into learning. So I know you're smart enough to solve complex issues, but the easiest ones to solve are the most profitable. I'm not going to tell you it was rocket science to solve and put in place a plan to acquire listings from expired listings. It was the easiest thing I did. It took time. It took thinking. It took writing, organization. Sure. But my gosh, it was solving a real money-making problem. It wasn't this esoteric, I hope this is solving some problem. And lastly, stick to the major basics, and there will be plenty of micro challenges that need resolution. So in other words, if you always want to be busy working on and in your business, when you start off with trying to figure out listings, then you decide, is it expireds, probates, FSBOs? Well, then you have to figure out where you're going to get those listings or those contacts. Then you have to figure out your scripting. Then you have to figure out your mailer. Then you have to figure out your presentation. See what I mean? We're going micro, but you got to choose the right macro starting point. All right, let me summarize it this way. New agents and veterans alike are busy solving problems that they perceive to be their biggest challenge. However, the real estate agent business works a certain way that to a large extent is unbendable or immutable. Therefore, when you understand it's a business based on the acquisition and sale of listings, you can direct your time, attention, and money to solving that issue first, and the rest will follow. All right, now remember, I'm going to say this again. You can take immediate action to get started in the right direction by being organized like this and understanding how the business works with a copy of our free strategic plan that's waiting for you at freeagentgift.com. Okay. Now, remember also, we'd appreciate it if you would comment on our posts and we know what you're thinking. So you engage us here. We'd be happy to answer those questions. Otherwise, we're just going to keep coming each week and trying to put up some good content that hopefully you take advantage of. Hey, thanks for listening. But remember this, I sign off the same way every single time. Nobody's coming for you. So go get to work on your own business, and I will be here in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks for listening.